Looks like there's no audio on this feed, but you can see all the players that are involved, at least in this first phase of the bilateral meeting. Questions were asked to both leaders. They didn't take the questions, and then quickly, the White House press pool, if you will, the aides, I should say, wrapped them pretty fast as the questions continued, and they somewhat blocked the cameras, and well, is what it looked like, and said thank you, press, to make sure no other questions can get in. Both leaders waiting to, I would say, holding their fire right now, right? Keeping their ammo dry at this point. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to discuss. President Trump has said he wants peace, but he is just setting the table for another meeting. Putin, for his part, has said that he likes the president's energy. Putin maybe hearing a question he doesn't like. Oh, okay. Looks like Putin responded to some question. Unclear what he said or what was asked. We're going to get more audio as this feed kind of comes through, and they put it through our system. Again, Putin has said that he has called for this meeting. This happened after Witkoff went to Moscow, met with Vladimir Putin, and now we have both leaders here in Alaska on U.S. soil in hopes of taking those first steps to the journey of peace for all the people of Ukraine who have had to live with that Russian invasion for nearly 3.5 years, that have lost 60 to 100,000 of their brave men and women. So many young men, even elderly men now fighting in Ukraine. People that were not even of fighting age anymore have come back to fight. And we've seen firsthand sort of the changing battlefield. This war has gone from trench warfare to now more foxholes and drone warfare. And Ukraine surprising the world with some of these sneak attacks with drones inside of Russia. And we should point out Ukraine, the much smaller of the two countries in every which way, landmass, population, wealth, military strength, and they have held off this Russian superpower for 3.5 years and have fought so violently. As Russia continues their aggression, a lot of people have said that this summer has been a turning point, that Vladimir Putin wanted to push more into Ukraine. He has been unable to do so. And as we have pointed out throughout our coverage, they have called in North Koreans, they have called in prisoners. They've let people get out of prison to go fight the war in Ukraine. They've asked North Korea for armaments as well. The war has changed a lot, not as easy as maybe Vladimir Putin had initially thought. Garrett Hake is here by my side, joining our coverage as well, been here from the get-go. To be a fly on the wall in that bilateral meeting right now, to see what the first question asked is and what Vladimir Putin really wants. Does he want a business deal here? Is he interested in peace, or is he interested in staying in power and strengthening his military through selling foreign oil?
Yeah, I mean, it's worth noting that this meeting only came about on the day that secondary tariffs were supposed to go into effect on Russia. Steve Witkoff was there on last Friday, which was the deadline that the president had set. President Putin then asking for this meeting. It's possible that all of this is a stalling tactic by the Russian president just to keep the conversation going, keep his opportunity to pursue that war going, as you were just outlining, Tom, a war in which he has all the traditional military advantages over a smaller neighbor. But as Keir and some of our other analysts have talked about, Russia wants back on the world stage. They want back into an opportunity to be seen as a player on par with the United States. And the president is giving it to them, at least in some extent, with these extraordinary images we've already seen. The greeting on the tarmac here, the B-2 flyover, and that drive, perhaps as long as 15 minutes. We're trying to figure out exactly where the beast went from the moment it picked up the two presidents and took them to that bilateral summit. But that opportunity, that image alone of the two presidents sitting side by side and smiling as they have a truly private conversation, Tom, something that's incredibly rare between world leaders who are close, not world leaders who are, at least on paper, adversaries.
Yeah, the president granted one-on-one interview while he was on Air Force One on the way to Russia. We have a clip from that interview. Let's roll that now.
So what are your expectations? I mean, is the goal of this meeting in Alaska to walk away with a ceasefire?
So when you talk about deals, it's all I do. My whole life I do deals. You never know. You don't like to have too many expectations. You want it because you have to weave and bob, and you don't know what's going to happen. But we're going to go and find out. I'd like to see a ceasefire. I wouldn't be thrilled if I didn't get it, but everyone says you're not going to get the ceasefire. It'll take place on the second meeting. The second meeting is going to be but I'm not going to be happy with that. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be, I won't be happy if I walk away without some form of a ceasefire. Now, I say this, and I've said it from the beginning, this is really setting the table today. We're going to have another meeting if things work out, which will be very soon. or we're not going to have any more meetings at all, maybe ever.
All right, the president's saying a lot of things there, but something very interesting happened in that interview. It sounded like he was setting a goalpost. Kristen Welker is still with us, joining our coverage from Washington. Kristen, it sounded like he wants a ceasefire out of this meeting. He kind of went back later and said, well, actually, I'm just setting the table for the next meeting, which had been the standard line all week. But he said there a few times he wants a ceasefire, and he won't be happy if he doesn't get it coming out of this meeting.
There's no doubt, Tom, that Western officials are putting that pressure on him, that is going to be the measure in their eyes of whether this is a successful meeting. They want an unconditional ceasefire immediately. That word unconditional is so significant. If there are strings attached, if there are no ceasefire at all, this will not be viewed as a success. He also said he wants that follow-up meeting, which would have to include President Zelensky, who of course has not been invited to this meeting at the request of President Putin. I had an opportunity to interview President Zelensky 3 different times, Tom. I can tell you he's adamant he is not going to cede this territory. He points to the fact this is not just a conversation about territory. It's a conversation about Ukrainian lives, the people who live in that territory. Zelensky referring to President Putin, Tom, as a terrorist in my first interview with him, and more recently, this past February, saying that he believes Putin is poised to move into other neighboring countries. And that's why the stakes here are so high, Tom. That's why you have European officials who are watching this with some consternation, with concern, because they believe this is, yes, about Ukraine. This is about Western democracies, but this is about the security, really, of all of Europe in their eyes, Tom. And that is why, from their perspective, the stakes here are so high. So again, you heard the urgency there in President Trump's voice that this is not just about this initial meeting, but trying to have a follow-on meeting as quickly as possible with President Zelensky. You talk about the optics, you talk about the reality TV commander-in-chief. For him, the gold standard, the big optic that he wants is not just standing next to President Putin, but standing next to President Putin and Zelensky. Tom.
Garrett, that was sort of a master class in studying a Trump answer.
Yeah.
He said he wants a ceasefire. He said he'll be upset if he doesn't get it after this first meeting. Then he kind of went back and said, we're just setting the table for the next meeting. Kind of hard to understand, but it feels like, again, and we're sort of interpreting here, it feels like the standard line from the White House was, we're setting the table, we're going to keep the bar low, and then Trump saying, showing a little bit of his cards.
That's right. I mean, earlier this week, the press secretary called this entire meeting a listening exercise.
Yeah.
This was certainly more advanced than that from President Trump, suggesting that he does want to see a ceasefire, and if he doesn't get it, he would be unhappy. But what that unhappiness means, I think, is very much an interesting question, because the president has expressed this unhappiness before. He's talked about this repeatedly, that Putin keeps bombing cities and that that's not good for him. His options to inflict more economic pain on Putin are extremely limited, and they would potentially inflict economic pain on Americans too. What do I mean by that? We saw him say he's going to put these extra tariffs on India to try to, punish them for buying Russian oil. Well, the only country that buys more Russian oil than India is China. Is the president willing to increase economic pressure on China at the expense of getting a deal with the Chinese on trade, on TikTok? That would be an escalation on a whole other front that I think he's been very trepidatious about going down that road.
I understand we have a little bit more from that interview. Let's play that now.
So if you were to paint a picture of what perfect looks like coming out of Alaska today, what does that look like in your mind?
Look, it's not for me to negotiate a deal for Ukraine, but I can certainly set the table to negotiate the deal. And our next meeting will have President Zelensky and President Putin and probably me. I'd like to focus on doing our country, but I get these interruptions. I've solved 6 wars in 6 months when you think about it, and that's from Pakistan to India. That was going to be a terrible one. Planes being shot down. That was getting ready to flare, and then nuclear powers, and so many others. And
Armenia, Azerbaijan, Congo, Rwanda. In fact, did you see that Hillary Clinton yesterday said that if you got this deal done and not capitulate to Putin, that she would nominate you for the Nobel Peace Prize?
If President Trump were the architect of that, I'd nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, that was very nice. I may have to start liking her again.
President Trump there. To give you guys some context here, former Secretary